Well, Brazil is fascinating to me because I first went to Brazil about 6 or 7 years ago. 7 years ago, I met the Mendes family who run the Eisenbahn Brewery, and they came to me and they said, "Garrett, we have this young brewery. We're getting it going. We need somebody to talk to people about beer and food and life and everything else. Can you come to Brazil and do some dinners with us?" And it was wonderful. Restaurants, really, so many great places. We had many from one city to another, and then I went and stayed with his family down in Bombinhas. We were hanging out at the beach, and now these guys, they sold the brewery later. But I think you'll see them again in beer. But now they're my friends, and I go visit Brazil over and over again, mostly not for business, mostly just to hang out. But it's always great to go back, and I was fascinated to see that the history of brewing that Brazil has, because I didn't know when I first went down there that Brazil had this big German side to its history that had brought them a big brewing culture. Yeah, maybe for us, mid-90s. Okay. And some things, in some ways you are moving faster because the internet and people traveling more, etc. So you started off really maybe with things coming from a German background. Very quickly you start to see a little bit here in IPA, an IPA there. Now you start to see the Belgian influence, coming in as well. Now, if you look at the American craft brewing, maybe you go back to 1983, 1984, and then it takes almost 20 years for a Belgian influence to show up. But, for Brazil, 3 or 4 years. So what you see is a shortening of the time of development. I see, guys like Marcelo from Colorado, and other guys, from Brazil, traveling, getting some ideas about brewing, going back to Brazil and making things that are exciting. So now I think you have a base that starts with the German heritage, but then adds England and adds the United States and adds Belgium. And I think what's most exciting is I want to see somebody make a beer with caju. I want to see people making beers that have a distinctive Brazilian character. Maybe to work with cachaça makers to take some of their cane juice and make something that has some of these flavors, things like that. Look at what Colorado is doing with the Capadura sugar and things like this to develop distinctly Brazilian flavors. And I think that's going to be really cool too. Well, it wasn't quite so fast because I had a nice job, I was making some good money. I mean, things were pretty easy. And then whenever you go from doing something else into brewing, in most cases you find things go from being easy to being hard. And that's the thing. But that's one of the things that makes for a really passionate, great brewing industry. Is that people have given up a lot. They gave up a lot. They walked away from jobs, that were paying them good money, in which they had a clear future, and they still have to pay for the house and the car and their kids and everything else. They said, but I'm leaving banking. I'm leaving being a lawyer. I'm going to be a brewer instead. I'm going to be happy. And that is the inspiring thing. That's why I think the craft brewing movement is so powerful, because people gave up a lot, to do what they're going to do. And, now that they're here, they're saying, I'm not compromising. I'm going to do what I want. Well, it was hard in some ways, especially because you go from being comfortable to being very hot and getting burned, and it's like working in a kitchen. It's not glamorous. It can be fun, but it's not glamorous. I mean, you have, it's hoses and pipes but there are very romantic parts, to it, and I think that you have to feel it. You have to feel it. If it's not in your heart, you're not going to make it. It's not worth it. You're going to work very, very hard. Many people think that oh, look at everybody's talking about craft breweries. They're the new guys, and then they get in there and they say, boy, it's really hot. It's really hot in here. This is really difficult. I'm doing a lot of plumbing. I went to college. For 4 years, I have a degree. I have a master's degree. Why am I doing all this plumbing? And some people, they move past that and they say, okay, I see why this is beautiful. And some people, they turn around and go back. And that's the same as anything. But I think that what makes craft beer is people, and their ideas, their dreams, their inspirations. People will say, 20 years ago I went on a trip to someplace special and I had an aroma or a flavor in my head, and now I'm translating that flavor and aroma into a beer. Not yet. I'm sure, Brazil has plans for Brazil. Our plan for Brazil is just to, I think that, we've been involved down there for some years. We have known a lot of the brewers, for some years. And, we just want to, be part of the scene and have some fun. Obviously Brazil is a country that for 20 years or more, people have been saying, oh, Brazil's the next big one. Brazil's the next big one. And it took a little time. Not in beer, in everything. Economy, etc. And now you can see, okay, finally now it's happening. Where Brazil is going to become in a way a world power, and a place that people have to pay attention to. They have paid attention to it for a long time for music and for some other things, but people have not paid attention to Brazilian beer. Years ago we had Jingu, and that was supposedly, that was the Brazilian beer, and that was it. And there's nothing wrong with that, but Brazilian beer is much more interesting than just that. So, what I'm excited about is to see what the new Brazilian brewers are going to do. What are going to be their ideas? They might, take some influences from other places. They'll make nice beers that maybe are something like ours or something like Belgians. But I think what will happen in Brazil is that people will make beers that are essentially Brazilian. And that's what's going to be exciting. When I hear Brazilian music, I hear it and I say, hey, that's Brazilian music. We take stuff from Brazilian music, but Brazilian music sounds like Brazil. I want to taste some beers that taste like Brazil. And so I think that in the next several years, that's what you're going to see. And, that excites me the most. It's great that people make other things, but, okay, so my question to Brazilian brewers is, okay, I can see your skills, and the beer tastes nice. Now, who are you? Who are you? What do you have to show us? They're going to show us some very cool stuff. I'm sure of it.